for doing a good citizen's job, trying to protect people. I don't get it.
Well, you only can understand it if you're in Manhattan and you're in the mind of DA Alvin Bragg.
In this video, Tomi Lahren and Marc Lamont Hill discuss the Daniel Penny case and BLM. Things get heated when Tomi Lahren tells Marc Lamont Hill that BLM is only using this issue to cause divisiveness. With that, let's watch Tomi Lahren destroy woke SJW Marc Lamont Hill.
Without any support, and then we end up with situations like this.
Right, but for his father to be lecturing everybody in the way that he did, again, I don't have a lack of empathy for him losing his son, but the lecture that he gave, you know, his son is wandering around as a homeless, mentally ill person on the subway threatening people. You know, with all due respect to his father, where was his father in his life? I mean, is that a reasonable question to ask? If that was one of my sons, I would feel an accountability and responsibility for the actions of one of my children. Would you?
I probably would, but I also don't think that that's the most important question. I may share with you the opinion. In fact, I do share with you the opinion that, hey, we should talk about family structures. We should talk about parenting. We should talk about fatherhood. But when a father's son is dead in this moment, we as a nation, just like with the healthcare issue, we have an opportunity to talk about the broader system instead of us criticizing how a mourning father is dealing with his dead son. Let's talk about the conditions that got us there. Let's not play a blame game.
Well, we're going to come to the cold-blooded execution of a healthcare executive, which I think is unfathomable to me that people would celebrate that happening literally within seconds of the guy being gunned down. But we're going to come to that debate in a moment, and obviously, Taylor, you're going to be a key part of that. But Tomi, I just sense that there's already a building momentum for this to be treated like a mini George Floyd situation. Now, I found the George Floyd story horrific. I thought what that police officer did was indefensible and appalling. But it's a completely different set of circumstances. This guy, Daniel Penny, he's a Marine veteran. He's on a subway, and he's watching somebody directly threatening to kill people. And he apprehends him, and he holds him down, because he doesn't want him to be a threat to the lives of people around him. That used to be the...
If you like videos like this one, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
The kind of behavior that would win people medals for valor. Now you end up in a criminal court facing the rest of your life in a prison cell. And that's what I find so just... I can't understand it. How has society moved to punishing people like Daniel Penny for doing a good citizen's job, trying to protect people? I don't get it.
Well, you only can understand it if you're in Manhattan and you're in the mind of DA Alvin Bragg. There's a whole lot we can talk about there. Not a lot of things that office wants to prosecute outside of Donald Trump and Daniel Penny and other heroes. But I would also say this, when we're talking about this case and Daniel Penny, and we're talking about the race element here, let's keep in mind, Daniel Penny is a big guy. He's strong. He's young. He's a former Marine. If he's on that subway and Jordan Neely comes in threatening people, probably the last person that's going to be the victim is Daniel Penny. He can hold his own. Daniel Penny stood up to protect people that maybe couldn't protect themselves, the women, the children. Also, if you look at the footage from that subway, a lot of those people in the subway were people of color. So you have a white man that's standing up to protect people of color in a subway, and yet BLM is so desperate for their grift and for their attention that they really want to make this about race.
I'm not joking when I say I genuinely thought we were all done with BLM. Their founders took $80 million plus, ran off with it, bought some homes, didn't give a dime to the Black American community. How anyone can take them seriously now is baffling to me. While I understand why this Daniel Penny case is getting so much press, as it should, BLM shouldn't even be a footnote in this. Everyone should just ignore them. They have zero credibility. Daniel Penny's case, it is so clear who is in the right here and who is in the wrong. For BLM to insert themselves into this is 100% about dividing people again and getting emotional people all worked up and turning this into a race thing when it clearly, not maybe, it clearly has nothing to do with race. I mean, one example is what Piers just described there. The people Daniel Penny was protecting were, many of them, Black Americans themselves. So what are we even talking about here? I can't believe Alvin Bragg even charged Daniel Penny. I mean, you can't see me right now, but I just paused for like 30 seconds straight because I'm literally speechless that Alvin Bragg even charged this guy. The guy is a hero. What is this society we're living in? And what kind of example does it set for the future and similar situations? Why would anyone step in to help anyone else if doing so means you're going to be locked up for the rest of your life? I feel like this all started when people started saying, you can't stop them, you can't touch them. If someone comes into business and just steals a bunch of stuff, like drugstores, I see it regularly, even the security guard is not allowed to stop them or put their hands on them. All they're supposed to do is basically observe it and report it to the police. That is insane. I cannot believe it has gotten this far. Anyway, needless to say, I'm shocked by everything about this case and very, very disappointed / frustrated with our country. But it's Alvin Bragg, so what else do you expect? Anyway, let's get back to the video.
The way I see it is you have a Marine who cares that he's white, standing up to protect people. He didn't care what color Neely was. He didn't care what color the people were around him.
Yeah.
He wanted to do the right thing.
I completely agree. Mark, it has nothing to do with skin color. And people that try and imply that it is, they are the ones playing the race card. I honestly believe that on this story. I've studied it in detail. I've seen all the footage. I've seen all the accounts. This is not a race story. Daniel Penny didn't do anything predicated on the skin color of Jordan Neely. He did it to protect people, as Tommy said, black, white, whoever. They were a multiracial subway at the time. Right? Where's the race element of this?
I'm fascinated by the certainty with which you say
Well, you tell me
he
why I'm
wasn't
wrong.
motivated by
Tell me why I'm wrong.
race. I'm not telling you you're wrong. What I'm telling you is that I have no idea what was in Daniel Penny's head. He could have been motivated by race. He could not have been motivated by race.
The jury did. That's why they just cleared him.
I would disagree with anyone who says he did that because of race. But I would also disagree with you saying unequivocally that race wasn't on his mind. You have no idea, but you have
there is no evidence.
To say things
There's no evidence.
You have but
zero.
I agree with you, and that's why
zero evidence.
And that's why.
So it's completely concocted.
I disagree with that. It's not completely concocted when you look at actual data on these types of things. But the bigger issue for me, because again, I'm not making a race argument.
How many types of these have there been?
Because
give me another one.
How many times?
How many times has a Marine veteran done a 6-minute chokehold to protect people on a subway from somebody who shouted, "I'm going to kill you"? How many times has that happened that you can rattle off right now, given you say it happens all the time?
So Piers, to be clear, I said things like this happen all the time, and the kind of sardonic question that you're asking seems clever to people who aren't smart, but as someone who's a trained social scientist, you don't have to have the exact same contextual factors to make comparisons.
Sorry, Mark, I'm sorry. You don't have to be a trained social scientist.
For example, it were a school bus instead of a subway, it wouldn't make it less important. If he were an Army vet instead of a Marine vet, it wouldn't make it less relevant. It's a silly question to ask me, when was the last time we were a Marine vet on a subway, blah, 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 blah. That's not the point.
Okay, so
my point is,
all right,
I never made it about race.
Hang on.
I never made it about race.
Hang on. So far, you've called me dumb, silly, and you say you're...
I didn't call you dumb.
What kind of...
Well, gosh, guys, I take back everything I said previously. Marc Lamont Hill is a trained social scientist. Wow. How weak is your case about whatever you're talking about if you're in a debate and you bring up your education credentials? I'm telling you right now, I've never done that once in my life, and I don't believe I've seen anyone do that, like in my personal life. And if they did, I would laugh in their face. What a dumb response. Marc Lamont Hill's role here is to defend the anti-Daniel Penny side, but he literally has nothing to talk about. So that's why he brings up stupid stuff like social scientists. And prior to that, he said, there's a lot of data around these type of things. And Piers says, what do you mean? When has a Marine choked out, laid out the case and said, when has this happened before? And he's like, I'm not saying that exactly. I'm just saying there are other cases like this. Okay, then name one. Name one. And maybe there are, but he's just trying to obfuscate and filibuster as long as he can and act appalled at the whole situation so he can pretend like his side of the argument has any validity whatsoever. And he says he agrees with Piers Morgan that this is not about race, and says, so if it's not about race and you agree with that, and you'd be the first one, I have no doubt whatsoever, to tell us if you thought it was remotely about race. So if you agree that it's not about race, then why is BLM involved? And then the only thing he has to counter with is, I'm just fascinated by your certainty. And Piers goes, there's no evidence. And like we said before, there's people of color all over the place that he's protecting. And Piers' answer about his own certainty was, there's zero evidence to suggest that. So what has Marc Lamont Hill contributed to this panel, or contributed to anything for that matter? God, I can't stand people like this. You know what would be refreshing is if somebody got on Piers Morgan that was supposed to be the opposite side of the argument, and was just honest for once and said, yeah, you know what, this wasn't about race. I agree with you. I don't have a lot to argue with about, and maybe point out a couple of things that the rest of the panel hadn't thought about. But this is so disingenuous. This whole conversation is silly. I mean, I'm enjoying it, but it's silly. Let's get back to the video.
What kind of scientist are you?
I didn't call you dumb.
What scientist are you?
Time out. You're not listening. I think you're very smart. I think you're making an argument that will only be persuasive to people who are not as smart as you. I never said you were dumb.
Well, let me respond to that.
When you rewind this, you'll see I never called you dumb. Yeah. I said you were being sarcastic.
You don't need to be, with respect, Mark.
I think you're being snarky with the
Mark,
question.
you don't need to be
so again,
with respect, you don't need to be a social scientist to know that there is zero evidence of any racial motivation for what Daniel Penny did. So people who are trying to infer it, that somehow, as the founder of BLM in New York says, if you think he's innocent, you're a racist, and the KKK just got another victory. I'm not a social scientist, but I know that's horseshit.
Right. Again, the statement from the BLM person in New York, I don't share, I don't echo, I don't agree with. You're asking me to defend a statement that I don't agree with. The statement that I am making, that you and I should be engaging, is the issue of implicit bias and the issue of use of force. There is
what bias?
There is. I said implicit bias.
Okay, just let's extrapolate that. You think if Jordan Neely had been white and came on that subway, right, and was acting like a deranged lunatic, for what Daniel Penny did, so people.
It wouldn't make it less relevant. It's a silly question to ask me, when was the last time we were a Marine vet on the subway, blah, 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 blah. That's not the point.
Okay, so
my point is,
all right,
I never made it about race.
Hang on.
I never made it about race.
Hang on. So far, you've called me dumb, silly, and you say you're...
I didn't call you dumb.
What kind of scientist are you?
I didn't call you dumb.
What scientist are you?
Time out. You're not listening. I think you're very smart. I think you're making an argument that will only be persuasive to people who are not as smart as you. I never said you were dumb.
Well, let me respond to that.
When you rewind this, you'll see I never called you dumb. Yeah. I said you were being sarcastic.
You don't need to be,
because
with respect, Mark.
I think you're being snarky with the
Mark,
question.
you don't need to be
again,
with respect, you don't need to be a social scientist to know that there is zero evidence of any racial motivation for what Daniel Penny did. So people who are trying to infer it, that somehow, as the founder of BLM in New York says, if you think he's innocent, you're a racist, and the KKK...
I take everything I say back again. Marc Lamont Hill just taught us all something that I was not aware of. Apparently now in society, you need to be a social scientist to determine between right and wrong. Wow, I'm glad I watched it all the way through, because he really gave me quite a lesson today. I want to give Marc Lamont Hill the benefit of the doubt here, because I think he misspoke. He said that Piers' argument is only one that would be accepted by dumb people. I think he just misspoke. I think what he meant is logical people. Obviously, I was being sarcastic earlier, but human beings with a soul know the difference between right and wrong, Mark. Anyway, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this whole case? Am I way out of line by saying BLM has zero reason to be involved with this situation? Or do you think race did play a role in this case? Let us know. That's it for this video. As always, we really appreciate you watching, and we will see you on the next one.